Michael, the last partner. He operates similarly to Kooper, and now I'm going to show you what I mean. Well, actually, for starters, Michael does have the advantage in the prologue. Despite lacking the lucky star, Spiny Flip can be used just fine without action commands. And good thing too, because his Spiny Surge doesn't actually work. Just brings back flashbacks to a previous challenge I've done. For this reason though, Red and Blue Goomba can be beaten in 5 turns. So far so good, but then we fight the Goomba King and things get rather odd. In this fight, you can't target the tree using Spiny Flip, meaning Goomba King, Red Goomba, and Blue Goomba have to all be beaten one by one. Not a big deal, I mean we have plenty of HP to survive this fight regardless. And the Parakarry is something to go by, it's not the first time this has happened either. So after about 6 turns and seeing Red and Blue Goomba mourn over their death of their king, we are soon able to get our lucky star and proceed through chapter 1. But not before defeating this magic Koopa that wanted to pick a fight with us. The fight itself wasn't very long, like 3 turns and that was really it. But a required fight's a required fight. Now chapter 1 of course is near the beginning of the game, and so there's not really much of challenge here. Fuzzies have only 3 HP and can be one-shot by Spiny Flip. That being said, despite the high FP cost of Spiny Surge, just using this move twice is generally enough. And since all of Michael's attacks do at least 2 damage per hit, it goes without saying that both the required fights with Bob-Bombs as well as the required fights in the Koopa Bros trap with the Power Troopas are also entirely possible. This leads us now to the Bill Blasters. Keep in mind now that Michael's Spiny Flip does 3 damage per attack, and these enemies have only 1 defense. So you have the options to use either Spiny Flip to do 2 damage, or use Spiny Surge to not only do 1 damage to all the Bill Blasters, but also to hit all the bullet bills that are spawned at once, which also proves to be a rather attractive option to get extra star points more quickly. That right there takes care of all the required enemy fights before chapter 1's boss. And now I think it's time for Trojan Bowser. He has 1 defense, Spiny Flip does 3 damage, 5 turns later he's done. A good start in this game of chicken. Unfortunately, we're heading towards a wall, and we're gonna crash right into it. That made no sense, but bear with me. With the 4 Koopa Bros on top of each other, promise me you did not put your head down that gutter. Lakilester can't hurt them. You have to be able to knock them down first. But in this challenge, Mario can't do anything. But because this fight is just such a bottleneck, earlier in chapter 1, I found myself a Thunderbolt while wandering about. Since this item immediately topples the tower down, I gave Lakilester 3 turns to defeat the Koopa Bros so that he can at least get partial credit for Trojan Bowser. This does demand quite a bit of FP though, because we need at least 12. The first 2 times we use Spiny Surge, it does 2 damage. But the 3rd time, the Koopa Bros are on their feet, and then it does only 1 damage. Fortunately for us though, the Koopa Bros have only 5 HP each. And just like that, all of them took exact damage and were all KO'd on the same turn. Of course, Lakilester could not beat the entirety of the game by himself, but this video's never been about that question, now has it been? So let's see just how much of the game Lakilester can beat by himself, right? Let's do it. Well, next up is Junior Troopa. Mostly standard. He has defense now, but Lakilester does like 3 damage per hit, so it doesn't really change anything for him. And thanks to the prologue, we have plenty of HP, so getting knocked out is not a concern for us either. Just like that, chapter 1 is behind us now, and the next couple of chapters will be pretty smooth sailing, starting with chapter 2. There are a few fights to look over, but first and foremost, let's get ourselves ranked up. At this oasis in the dry desert, Lakilester learns a new move called Cloud 9. What it basically does is it gives Mario a coin flip's chance of not getting hit by an enemy attack. Not quite 50-50, more like 45.5%, but you know, potato. Afterwards we fought Buzzar. So I found this pretty funny. Cloud 9 can't prevent Mario from being hit by the Gale Wind's attack, but you can still match the A button because of Spike taking the hit. Given this, we might still be able to save on damage we're taking, but I wouldn't rely too much on this move either. The rest of the fight though is pretty standard, just spam Spiny Flip until Bowser gets knocked out. It's all around just a very easy boss fight and there's not much else to it. Though even if this fight was anything special, beyond the fact that it's an airborne enemy, Michael doesn't really have that problem with range. Remember, he's a Lakitu, and he can throw spiny eggs at enemies, which generally don't have an issue of range at all. And not just range, but also elemental defenses. Cue the Pokemummies in the Dry Ruins trap. Michael is perfectly safe just throwing his spiny eggs at them, and the spikes don't really deter him whatsoever. And to be honest, they really shouldn't anyway, because he's using his hands to hold a spiky egg. He must have developed some kind of callus there, you know? I bet Spike would be really good at playing guitar. And of course, swoops would not be an issue for him either. While they're airborne or on the ceiling, those spiny eggs have no issue hitting you. And it goes without saying, but the stone chomps are no issue for him either. It's kinda crazy to think, by the way, that a beam made out of solid rock has the same amount of defense as a baby protected only by eggshells. What's up with that? Meanwhile, the Chomps in Tentankoopa's fight have 3 defense. And speaking of Tentankoopa, that's the next boss fight. A little slow for my liking, but all the same very possible. At its fastest, this fight lasted 7 turns. The Chomps could take damage, but they only take 1 per hit, because we only have an attack power of 4, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Once Tentankoopa's knocked out, the Chomp dies with him. Chapter 2 completed. And now for my favorite chapter in this entire series, Chapter 3. Why? Because it's here we can get a bunch of live shrooms. And from here on out, the question just because if a partner can actually hit the boss at all. Onward we find Junior Troopa in the Forever Forest. He's flying now, but that's really not going to change anything. Michael still has no issue actually doing damage to you. Though I did have an issue with Cloud9 here because it didn't prove to be very effective at all. I complain more, but I don't really have to use FP for anything in this fight anyway. That's the thing about Michael though, he doesn't really use FP unless there's multiple enemies to fight. Cloud9 is kind of offset by the fact that Mario has so much HP thanks to live shrooms, and the move he learns in Chapter 5 is especially useless. Even Bo had a reason to use Spook when she was trapped in Chapter 2, but I highly doubt we're going to find any use for Hurricane later in the challenge. But yeah, Junior Troopa was no problem whatsoever. And now there was the heart of Tubba Blubba. Though Cloud9 was a little bit useful at least for avoiding the charge attack. It still didn't always work, but you know, we're vibing. After a while, the heart would run away like a coward, and then we just threw like 3 Spinies at Tubba Blubba himself, which ends the fight. 3 chapters down, and Lakilester has been mostly undeterred. Now, Chapter 4 brings its own challenges alongside it, but first and foremost, we have to fight Blooper. Though all that can be said for this fight can honestly be said about Buzzar, except for even less. Mainly because Buzzar hits harder and has more HP, and can actually hurt Lakilester. So this much I find mostly redundant. But since we're here, we can very much defeat Blooper without any issues. As far as Chapter 4 is concerned though, there's Anti-Guy, which I'm not fighting yet. But then there's Big Lantern Ghost, a boss that most partners cannot defeat, and Lakilester is no exception. I find it so sad that Lakilester can't even use Spidey Search here because the game just cuts it off. So you have to Spidey flip the lantern twice to be able to see Big Lantern Ghost, but the instant you do, he will just blow the lantern out, making this fight entirely impossible for him to complete. Unfortunate, but inevitable. But this brings us now to the boss of Chapter 4, General Guy. The lead up to the actual tank is actually pretty easy. Thanks to Defend Plus, the Shy Squad is pretty much harmless to Mario. Meanwhile, Stilt Guys are 2 KO by Spiny Flip. As for the Shy Sack, well this is where Spiny Surge comes in. After using this move twice, both Shy Sacks have only 4 HP apiece. And then all it takes is a single Spiny Flip and they both get knocked out, one after the other. This brings us to the tank itself. At first, I wasn't studying the light bulb at all because I thought it was not really worth it, but then he kept using it, and then I realized I really don't want Lakilester to be knocked out for a few turns. It's just really annoying not being able to do anything because you missed a single guard. Though after the light bulb got broken, it was just Spiny Flip after Spiny Flip on General Guy himself, and eventually we win. And to think, we're not even halfway done with the game yet. But I have to say now, Spike's been really proving himself. The next important fight though was impossible for Spike. In fact, it's impossible for literally every partner that's not Watt. As not only can you not attack Fuzzapede while it's dark, you can't even encounter Fuzzapede while it's dark without Watt brightening the room. So yeah, this fight is complete bust. Man oh man, Michael, just take off your freaking shades. You might be able to see without them on. Who's that partner? Chapter 5 though was interesting for Michael here. Of course, the ambushes and the putrid piranhas are nothing to talk about whatsoever. It's not until deep within the Jade Jungle where we have some actual issues. You see, there's a fight here with 3 putrid piranhas and the White Machikoopa. The White Machikoopa's the dangerous enemy here. Because check this out. No matter what Michael does, he cannot outpace the healing of that White Machikoopa. His Spiny Flip does only 4 damage at Super Rank, while the White Machikoopa restores 5 HP per use. Spiny Surge does only 3 damage. The White Machikoopa can heal 3 HP across the entire party. What I'm driving at is that it's impossible for Michael to win this fight consistently without any RNG getting in the way of that. I mean, technically you could win this fight if you're lucky, but luck sucks. And it's a shame because just around the corner, we get the Ultra Stone from Raphael the Raven. And with this, Lakilester gets ranked up to an Ultra Rank partner. And at Ultra Rank, he learns the move Hurricane, which All this move amounts to is just blowing enemies off the screen. The move as is, though, had a pretty bad missed opportunity. It would have been really freaking useful if we had just one fight earlier, but it's a shame we don't. On a brighter note though, we fight Junior Troopa again, and this is a fight that at least Michael can win. Spiny Flip does 4 damage per turn, the same amount of damage that Junior Troopa can do to Mario. But we go first, and as a result of this, by the time we do 20 damage, Junior Troopa just takes 16. It's now we really start to feel just how low Lakilester's attack power really is. Though to his credit, Michael does just fine for the upcoming fights too. Electro Blooper's easy, just spam Spiny Flip and you'll win eventually. Sometimes it'll electrify itself, but Spiny Flip will knock the electrocution out of him, so what does it really matter? And then there's the case of Lava Piranha. This is a fight where Spike's Spiny Surge is really useful. This move actually 2-hit KOs the Lava Buds. And in phase 2, where the Lava Piranha is also on fire, the second time this move hits the Lava Buds, it also KOs the Petit Piranhas, so the damage output is actually severely hindered on the opponent's side. Michael doesn't even need Cloud9 here, he does just fine without it. And might I add, this fella's flying high tonight. Chapter 6, likewise, was also very good for Lakilester. I think just about every fight here was possible for him. Monty Moles, of course, get knocked out in like 3 turns thanks to Spiny Surge. But if you feel fancy, just use Hurricane, it works just as fine. Not so much against Super Blooper, but all the same, very easy. Though compared to Will's other partners, of course, Michael has a pretty bad damage output. Actually, it's this far in the game we really start to feel how weak Michael's attack power really is. Like, every other partner can actually do some decent damage with enough setup. Goombario has Charge, Kooper has Fire Shell, Bombette's Explosions do 7 damage apiece. Parakarry's Shell Shot does 7 damage, Bo's Fan Spat can do 10 damage at max. Sushi's Tidal Wave is just lethal. And Watt? Well, Watt's not very strong either, but she ignores defense, which will be a very big deal late in the game. Michael may have good range because of his indirect attack being a thrown object, but by now, most partners have good range, so he doesn't really stand out anymore. It's kind of disappointing just how hard Michael fell off. He's still very reliable though. After all, he has no issues with Super Blooper at all. Spiny Flip still does okay damage, and he can't KO the Blooper babies using Spiny Surge. Yeah, Cloud9 still sucks, but you can still manage. And manage Michael does. It's kind of funny, by the way, how fighting the Lakitus in Chapter 6 kind of makes Lakilester a traitor ahead of time, but I believe that Johnathan is just cool enough to blow them all off. And as I'm using a Hurricane against all of these Spinies and Lakitus, and even this yellow Magic Koopa, you know, on one hand, I wish a Hurricane was a stronger attack. I live in Florida, so Hurricanes here are pretty dang scary. This move should do like 30 damage to every enemy on the screen, leave them with Vizzy status, maybe for a modest 16 FP. You know, Nintendo, hit me up if you want some game balance tips. And speaking of Michael, Michael has to fight Michael on a fight to the death. Oh, I'm sorry, Spike? Listen, partner, the only Spike I know is the dragon from Friendship is Magic. Well, actually, no, there's also Spike from Ape Escape, but I haven't played that game in years. You know those really old PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 games that you used to play when growing up, but you don't anymore? That's just one game I remember really fondly. Maybe you can relate. By the way, I have to imagine that Lakalulu is just so confused right now because she sees 2 of her boyfriend out at once. Anyway, Spike wanted to know, why do I do all of this fighting? Well, Lakilester, my man, it's because I have a YouTube channel. A YouTube channel where I've been uploading videos playing this game with every single partner, including you, with the sole intent of seeing just how far all of these partners can go on their own power. You just so happen to be the 8th of 9 partners I've done this series with. And along the way, hopefully I gain some subscribers, maybe make some ad revenue because I desperately need it right now. And above all else, just give people a good time. And, I guess if you got this far in the video, well, I don't want to talk about subscribers or liking the video or anything because let's be honest, that's really annoying. So instead, I'm going to psychically link with your brain to transmit the message that will make you want to subscribe to this channel. What do you mean I got a fax machine? And no, finally, we're at Huff and Puff. Obviously, this fight would not be hard for Lakilester. The way Huff and Puff is designed is specifically to be exploited by Lakilester's Spiny Surge. All you have to do to win is use Spiny Flip on turns where Huff and Puff is not healing, and use Spiny Surge on turns where he is healing. Huff and Puff's AI is also very predictable. He can only try to heal on the 1st, 3rd, 6th, and 10th turns. And those turns themselves only count when Huff and Puff himself gets to actually act. After the 4th inhale, he does one more electric attack on the ground, and the cycle repeats itself. This is why in the first turn, I use a defensive skill instead of actually attacking, because damage from the first turn will not stick. Of course, the fight did take a while, but it wasn't very hard. For once, not being able to hit very hard isn't really a drawback. Congratulations, Michael. You betrayed and euthanized your boss more quickly than any test subject on record. By now, we'd have every partner in the game. So while we have some free time, let's look at some of these other bosses that we haven't quite tried to tackle yet. There's the Anti-Guy in the Shy Guy's Toy Box and the Dojo. Anti-Guy is easy enough. I mean, yeah, he does a lot of damage in a single turn, but he can never really KO Mario in a single hit either. His defense is just too strong. Meanwhile, Michael does at least 5 damage per turn, so after 10 turns he will win. This fight's easy though. I'm more curious about the fight with the Anti-Guy unit, and that's all the way in Chapter 8. But for what it's worth, Michael, I'll give you some credit now. What really matters now though was the Dojo, and only one fight really matters to me. Chan, Lee, and the first 2 Master fights are whatever. I'm more curious about Master 3 and if Michael can actually survive. I mean, you absolutely can, and if you're actually good at the game like me, you can survive without using Last Stand too. Unfortunately, I tend to struggle quite a bit. Other partners don't need Last Stand to win this. Michael though does need Last Stand, because he only does 4 damage every turn, and that averages to around 25 turns of survival. With how every other partner had to fight this boss, yeah, that would not work. Now for Spike, it is a subtle lack of power since he has an attack power of 4 here while most other partners have 5, but if you watch the other videos up to this point, you recognize just how much of a difference it really has. Because yeah, Michael has plenty of life streams at the end of the day, but he needed a real crutch to actually survive, beyond the enormous count of live streams anyway. But all the same, he gets a diploma. Though of how he played, I want to call it a GED. And it wouldn't be long before he had a BAD time with Kenshi Koopa. You know how Michael has an attack power of 5 at the max? Kenshi Koopa has 6 defense. So you physically cannot knock him down either, and that makes this fight impossible for him. A real shame, I know. It's Flurry! What do she and Lakilester have in common? But at least that means there isn't much standing between here and Chapter 7. After giving the Penguin Mayor a cloudy climb to the skies above, we fight Junior Troopa in the frozen Iceland. Doing only 4 damage per turn, it stands to reason that this fight would take a while. But with Mario's defenses as good as they are, it meant that this fight would just be slow and painful. Though mostly for Junior Troopa. For me, it's just slow, but not really painful at all. I mean, have you seen my defenses? Second up was Monstar, who was also a very easy fight. What's 20 divided by 5? 4. That's how many turns it took to win this fight. And some more math, what's 1 minus 1? Well, that's how much damage I took throughout the entire fight too. Thank you, Defend Plus. As for the Crystal Palace, literally everything here I just used Hurricane to beat. Magikoopas, Hurricane. White Clubbas, Hurricane. Dupligos, Hurricane. When you're as weak as Lakilester is, you want to finish fights as soon as freaking possible, I promise you that. And not many fights demonstrate better than the fight with the Crystal King himself. For every turn there were no illusions, I would use Spiny Flip and do 3 damage maximum every turn. And if the illusions did come out, I would instead use Spiny Surge, doing 2 damage per turn instead. So oftentimes, I'm alternating between 3 damage and 2 damage. And of course, beyond guarding the dangerous attacks that the Crystal King has that could potentially freeze me solid, it was just alternating between Spiny Surge and Spiny Flip. Spiny Flip, Spiny Surge, Spiny Flip, Spiny Surge. Sometimes I use 2 Spiny Flips in a row because of this Crystal King healing himself, but the point I'm making is crystal clear. This fight was just back and forth. Like, it's like breathing. You breathe in and you breathe out. And of course I win. After all, I take almost no damage nowadays thanks to how much my defense really has grown since the beginning of Chapter 5. You know, for as tedious as Michael has been this entire playthrough, he does a wonderful job showing just how freaking far danger badges can carry you. Cause I was set with my Last Stand and damage dodges. And that ends Chapter 7 and rescues our final Star Spirit too. Finally, we reach Chapter 8, and instead of flying up there, we use a starship because I guess Michael's not good enough for flying. Anyway, the first fight of note here is against 3 Koopa Trolls and 1 Magikoopa. Now, I could attack by using Spiny Surge or using Spiny Flip, but Hurricane is much faster. Unfortunately, there are no shortcuts against the Anti-Guy unit. And my god does this suck, having to use a 4 damage area of effect attack against boss level enemies with 50 HP and either 10 or 12 attack power. It didn't help that I was feeling really out of it, and I was missing ram blocks like crazy. So in frustration, I was actually using Cloud 9. Because at the rate I was playing, Michael would have lost the fight, and it wouldn't even be his fault, it'd have been my fault. But without Cloud9, and assuming you were blocking literally every attack coming your way, you could survive. I mean, barely. You'd have like 1 life stream left and almost no HP. But Michael is guaranteed to win this fight all the same, so good for him. Though now that this is behind us, I don't think the future for Michael is very bright. For example, there's Junior Troopa number 6. And since he has 2 defense, that means Michael does 3 damage every turn, which is less than basically every other partner. But I'm not gonna dock Michael points just for being slow. No, I'm docking points because he has no way of really beating Junior Troopa's healing. You know what's funny? Michael can only do 3 damage per turn. Meanwhile, Junior Troopa heals 10 HP in 1 turn if he wanted to. So in theory, this could be a stalemate for Lakilester if he gets unlucky. I mean, that doesn't happen, obviously. But all the same, that's not a good look for him at all. But the look doesn't get any prettier as we get into Hallway Bowser. He may have less HP than Junior Troopa and less defense, but Michael's attack power is already pretty weak. And by the time that Bowser activates Star Shield, he still has 42 HP left, and by now, Michael only does 1 damage per turn. Mario would have to survive for 40 plus turns just for Michael to KO Bowser. A tall and unenviable order to ask for when you consider the fact that Bowser's Fire Breath can one-shot Mario after a life stream is exhausted. And Michael's other moves aren't really any use here. There is Cloud9, which for about 4 FP, maybe less when you use Flower Savers, will grant Mario a 50% chance of evasion, or really 49.5%, but let's not be too technical here. But all the same, it doesn't always activate, and if Bowser wants to, he can immediately get rid of that buff as well. So safe to say, without incredibly good RNG, Michael's not winning this. Such a crying shame. Still, at the very least, Michael can technically win this fight. Just he doesn't win on my run because, well, let's be real here, it's beyond unrealistic. Still, not too bad overall for a partner with so little attack power overall like Michael. But it's time to ask the ultimate question, and that's how did he do? Assuming my math is correct, Michael has a total of 26 points at the end of the game. Not a bad score, it's at the top of B tier. But it's only next week we'll get to see if that score will actually last, because next time will be Sushi. He might stay in the podium, he might not, but we'll see soon enough. Now believe it or not, this is only one of 9 videos on Paper Mario 64 using only partners. So if you want more Paper Mario, just click here, put your feet up, and enjoy. Until next time, this is Phantom A signing out. I love y'all, take care.